as we talked about earlier, we never have all the information. Okay, our brains basically fill in the blanks.
Right.
Of all the things that are uncertain or we don't know or could turn out multiple different ways. This model is called choice.
Okay.
Okay, and choice is the act of making a decision to decide. Okay, and actually, this is a fun fact that I learned the other day. The word decide, its roots are from Latin, and literally it means to cut off.
I can see that.
Okay, so when you make a decision, you're cutting off the other possible avenues that you could explore to focus on one that you will decide to go do. And, it's often uncomfortable and we resist making a choice.
Right.
Or making a decision. It feels uncomfortable to do this because we're cutting off things that could work. Or we're choosing not to do, this is the opportunity cost part.
Right.
We're choosing not to do some other things that may be just school.
Right.
But until you actually make a decision, your brain has a really hard time figuring out what it's going to do next.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that when you actually, and I always find this most valuable when you do it verbally. You say, I am deciding to do X. I am choosing to do this now. Then the mental simulation parts of your brain automatically kicks in and says, okay, if this is where you are now and this is where you want to go, these are all the things you need to do to get there.
Yeah, and it's amazing that as soon as you make that decision, and it really doesn't matter what the decision is, as long as they're pretty equal, you're going to feel so much better, no matter what the decision is.
Yeah, and this, when we were trying to decide whether or not to move to New York, we were in this position. So we had the potential opportunity. There was a lot of uncertainty with what I was going to do for my job.
If I was going to make enough money in my job to make it worth us living there, because we didn't know what was going to happen with Josh. I mean, there were so many unknowns.
Yeah, and we probably had, probably less than half the information at that point.
Yeah.
But my friend PJ Eby has a really wonderful saying. He says, indecision is suffering.
Which cuts right to it.
Yeah, and it really is true. I mean, the longer you persist in a state of indecision, no matter what it's about,
horrible,
the more energy you burn, the more miserable you are, because it's easy to play scenarios, over and over and over again, trying to find the perfect thing. Well, you can't find the perfect thing. You don't have enough information. But the act of making a decision or a choice, no matter what it is, once you make the choice, your brain can start doing all of these wonderful things to help you make it work. You just have to commit before your mind's going to do that for you. And so it was amazing that once we decided, and we're like, we don't have all the information, but living in New York is an experience that we want to have.
Yeah.
We are deciding to do this. It's going to happen.
In an instant, it was like, okay, we're excited. Okay, so what are we going to do? And all the rest of it starts falling into place.
Yep. Same thing happened when we decided to move here to Colorado.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we are going to move here. And then we start looking for places to live. We start looking for cars. We start, all of the stuff that we couldn't start thinking about before we actually made a decision. And so, it sounds almost too basic to be useful. Like, make a decision.
But when you're in that situation of being between at least two, maybe more than that things, you know that feeling in the pit of your stomach.
Yeah.
And you also know the relief you get from choosing anything. And I think sometimes we think, oh, I made the right decision. That's how I know I feel good, which sometimes is true. Like if you make one thing and you still feel really, really, really bad about it, you know, probably you should go back. But normally it's just if you decide something, you're going to feel better.
Right. And the thing is, sometimes we're kind of up in the air between two or three things that we keep going over and over and over again. And the truth of the situation is our mental simulation capabilities are so good that if we can't decide between a couple of options, they're probably pretty much the same. So it really, in that sense, it really doesn't matter which one you choose.
At least equally good, even if they're not similar choices.
Right.
Yeah.
So, in that circumstance, it's always a good tiebreaker question for me. It's like, what experience do you want to have?
Yeah, this is a good one.
Of all of these options, what is the thing that you want to experience in your life, or something that you would like to try? And that's a good tiebreaker that,
Yeah.
if different things look equally good, then, what's going to be cool?
Yeah, and it usually
It's
leads
gonna be
you on
fun.
an adventure, and that's kind of nice.
Right. So, long story short, you have to make a decision. And you're never going to have all the information. And so, when you make a decision and make it out loud, commit it to yourself, it sounds very simple, but just that simple act of cutting off some options and committing to one will help you figure out what the next step looks like. That's choice.